Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us today at Umbraco Codegarden 2021. My name is Kimberly Blessing, and I'm the head of technology at Dog Digital in Glasgow, Scotland. I'm going to be co-presenting the session today with Matthew McPherson, who is our technical lead. I'm going to let Matt introduce himself in just a moment, but I want to let you all know that my background is mostly in front-end development. Although I head up the team, we do quite a lot of Umbraco work. We're going to be talking about Umbraco Cloud, and this was a real learning experience for me. So we're going to try to present some of these ideas and concepts in a way that even if you haven't used Umbraco Cloud, you'll hopefully learn a little bit as we go through this. So let us know whether or not we've done it well in the comments, and we'll try to follow up in the unconference session. So Matt, tell everybody about yourself.
Hello, so I am Matthew McPherson. I'm the technical lead at Dog Digital. Kind of my background in largely back-end or full-stack development, and I've been working with Umbraco since 2018. And I'm certified and been working with it very regularly since I joined Dog.
Cool. Thanks very much. And just so folks understand a little bit about Dog, company's been around for 24 years, and we do a whole host of creative and marketing work for our clients. Our clients span a large number of business sectors, government, nonprofit. So there's quite a wide variety in the work that we do. And our technology team includes not just our front end and back end development teams, but also IT and infrastructure. And so we're not a massive team, but we do quite a wide variety of bespoke website development and application work. And so what we're trying to do when we think about using Umbraco Cloud is maximizing sort of the resources that we have available, people. We want to maximize the talent and the people that we have. And so Umbraco Cloud is particularly appealing to us for just a few reasons. First of all, as a business, we're slowly shifting away from doing a lot of hosting and infrastructure management. Part of this is just because cloud services in general have become so popular. More and more of our clients are not expecting us to be managing physical hardware, actual network services. We don't run on-prem solutions anymore. That's, so 3 years ago. Not even 10 years ago, 3 years ago. And so with Umbraco Cloud, the fact that Umbraco is taking on that hosting and infrastructure management in the cloud for us really helps us out and gives us a great amount of confidence. The fact that they also provide facilitated upgrades and expert level support means, again, our business investment is minimal. And when it comes down to it, if you're running an agency, and even if you're part of a product team, you don't want to spend a lot of time on support because it's not a revenue generating activity. So the more that we're able to rely on, again, Umbraco and the services that they're providing with cloud, the more it's going to help us out and provide benefit, of course, to our clients. And then I think the bit that I was particularly interested in, I know the rest of our team was, but I think always the big problem when you're trying to manage websites across a local environment, a development environment, a QA or staging environment, as well as a live environment with your clients, where they're probably only updating their content in the live environment. When they call in and they've got that issue, oh, something doesn't look right. The first thing you want to do is pull that back and get it into a lower environment so that you can experiment with it and poke and prod at it. So Umbraco Deploy, having that content synchronization capability really was appealing so that we weren't having to sort of do manual copies or trying to manually recreate information across versions. So those are just a couple of the reasons why we were looking at Umbraco Cloud, and so that may resonate with some of the folks in the audience who might be considering it, or maybe that's exactly why you've chosen to go with it as well. So I think Matt was actually the person who came to me and said, hey, Umbraco's got this cloud-based product, which I think was originally called Umbraco as a Service, SaaS platform, but now called Umbraco Cloud. And I said, great, sounds awesome. Let's have a look at it. I really only came up with 2 requirements. The first one being, let's try to maintain our existing workflow and tools as much as we possibly can. And I kind of left it to Matt running, heading up our backend development team to tell me what that meant from their perspective. So Matt, I'm going to let you just step in and give a little context.
So the biggest thing for us there is, as kind of touched on here, this was an existing workflow we had in place. We've got the existing platform, existing tooling, and we didn't want this new tool to disrupt that. Everyone's trained in the same way, expects to work in the same way. If something is different, it's only gonna cause error eventually. So our tool of choice is Azure DevOps. So we wanted to integrate within then. All the kind of integrations within that allow us to manage our all the task boards, all of our requirements are in there, all of our back and forth communications are in there, all of our test cases are in there. The commits, again, within DevOps can associate with those tickets. So we're able to track commits, we're able to track pull requests, very easily get all of our tooling within this package. So the primary requirement here was make sure we could integrate it and that we don't have to adjust our process to introduce some new tool into the works.
Yep, exactly. Thank you. And then on top of it, I added this other requirement of let's make sure that whatever solution we've got, staging and live, are always matching infrastructure solutions, which we get right out of the box with Umbraco Cloud. But certainly with other solutions we've looked at in the past, you sometimes have slightly different scales, sometimes completely different infrastructure configurations between your pre-production and your live environment. And that always ends up leading to some sort of code complexity, some branching within the code, or just differences in those configurations that lead to unknown problems, which we just didn't want to have to deal with. So again, another great reason for us to go with Umbraco Cloud. Did I forget anything there, Matt?
No, I think we're all good.
Cool. I have him here to keep me honest. So this was where I basically said, cool, let's go have a look at this. Let's go have a look at Umbraco Cloud. And it didn't take very long before Matt came back to me and said, we've got a challenge that we have to solve with this. And I'm going to be completely honest with everybody. This is about where my knowledge stopped. I understood the context of the problem, but how we were going to solve it, completely in Matt's hands. And so basically the challenge that we've got here is on the left-hand side of the screen, we're looking at a picture of Internet File Explorer. This is an Umbraco build repository, and it's got two folders highlighted or with red boxes around them. And those two folders are the controllers directory and the extensions directory. And then on the right-hand side, you've got another File Explorer window, and this is the equivalent Git repo that you get from Umbraco. So Umbraco Cloud gives you your own Git repo, but there's a difference between them. Controllers and extensions don't exist within the Umbraco Cloud version. And basically, we need to keep track of those somewhere. We need controllers and extensions, as I have come to learn, in order to fully manage all of our source code. So controllers, you really can't build much of a bespoke site for a client without some Umbraco controllers. Certainly search, needing to create a search of Umbraco indexes, that's all going to be done in your controllers, and any sort of custom business logic that you need to create for any sort of application is going to be in that directory. And then your extensions, I came to learn as well. If you want to have alternative text, alt text, the alt attribute on an image in Umbraco, you've got to write that in as a custom extension. So almost from the get-go, every Umbraco site, at least that I could understand, was going to have these bits of code. So we needed to manage those somewhere so that once built, this all ended up in the deployment artifact or in the Umbraco Cloud Git repo.
Yeah, but so, even additional to what we see pictured here, obviously you might have code in different structures, not necessarily just controllers and extensions. There could be multiple other ways you wish to organize your code. This impacts any custom written kind of .NET code that needs to be compiled before it becomes a deployment. Additional to that, it's also your actual project structure, your Visual Studio solution, your Visual Studio project files. Potentially your solution has multiple projects that get compiled into one deployment. So a lot of that just simply isn't available when the repository from cloud is the finalized deployment artifact.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to let you take it from here and continue with explaining the challenges.
Okay. So as we touched on, the cloud repo is just a deployment artifact. So the Umbraco Cloud documentation does have documentation on how to then, from that deployment artifact, get a Visual Studio solution to allow you to start building your own custom code. So their process is they have provided a script which you can take given your Umbraco Cloud clone ID and valid credentials. It'll check out the Umbraco Cloud solution and it will build you a Visual Studio application for it. And it then has the true Umbraco Cloud repository nested within that. So you could have your source code repository, but then nested within that would be your Umbraco Cloud repository. That could be a valid way of working. However, it doesn't really align with our tooling because the Umbraco Cloud repository is nested within it. Anyone could copy and paste whatever files they want to into that and commit that, and that is in a deployment that goes through the kind of cloud deployment pipeline. So it does avoid the processes we've got set up. It avoids the pull requests, it avoids any continuous integration tests, tasks that we've got running. Things like in the previous image, you'll see we had a SaaS folder. On build, that gets compiled down into the CSS and gets minified, and only those minified CSS files are actually part of the deployment. But additional to that, whilst the cloud repository is source control, so you can see the changes, if we're making kind of C# changes or .NET changes, those are all compiled down. So the difference we see in terms of commit from the Umbraco Cloud repository is just a DLL version change. You really can't see what's actually happened under the hood until we go back that layer and get the pull request from source code to see the code before it's compiled. And I guess additional to that as a final point is in terms of the deployment process, even when it is managed and intended, the developer needs to know what should be part of a built deployment for a site, not just source code, but what needs to go in, both in context of what a site should contain, but additionally, what if I'm just deploying a small feature change? What if someone else in the team has modified X, Y, or Z since a cloud deployment was managed? That becomes unclear. That could lead to human error. And because of there are no checks on the deployment, it has potential to cause problems. So what we decided we needed was really, rather than the Umbraco suggested approach of a repo within a repo, is we wanted to manage a separate repository, which would go through all of our standard processes, all of our standard checks, but in an automated fashion. Whenever we were happy that our source code was approved for deployment, we want to automate the build and automate some deploy into cloud. And really that then alleviates this concern we've got with that disparity between what is source code and what is the Umbraco Cloud repository. So that was the objective for us to come over. So moving on to the solution. So after some research, and we did speak with Umbraco directly, we did get assistance directly from an Umbraco engineer to kind of help us out here. We looked at some other approaches in terms of if we could mirror the Umbraco repository within our own tooling, but because of that disparity between source code and deployment repo, there was little value in that. So eventually we did come across this article for the Script magazine by Paul Sterling, who we will be speaking to shortly, in which he achieved something very similar. And this is kind of the foundation of what our solution is built for. So in here, they discuss a PowerShell script, and that is using very similar process to what we have come up with, which is once a build is done, I believe this was as part of an Octopus deploy pipeline. Once a build had been performed, the PowerShell then clones out the Umbraco repository, copies the source code build into the repository and commits that. And committing into the Umbraco repository then initiates the deployment process to the Umbraco Cloud development environment.
And I think just to point out at that link, that blog post, there is a link into a GitHub repo where you can get the script that Matt was just describing.
So with that bit of investigation, we kind of readjusted what we were looking to do, and now we realize we're looking for an automated build as per, but rather than the ambiguous deploy we were previously speaking about, we now understand that to be a copy and a commit process. So copying it from our source code repository as a deployment artifact into cloud, and then committing that into cloud, which then deploys it.
And everything seemed like it was going to go great.
Until. So one of the first challenges we came across was version management, because now what we have is two independent repositories that in theory should be equivalent but independent. And Umbraco Cloud has this really handy, useful feature in which it automatically updates patch version numbers, which generally speaking would be great. However, in our case, because we've now got a disconnected repository, there's potential in situations we have hit whereby Umbraco Cloud automatically manages the version update to the next patch version. However, when we're making our local changes, we are now behind Umbraco, so we can't just take our local and update that, because what we're functionally doing is then downgrading Umbraco again, and whatever chaos that might cause. So our solution here, moving on to the next slide, is I guess amending the PowerShell that we were inspired by that previous post. So I guess we're rolling back a little bit. The previous PowerShell was based in Octopus Deploy. So we've taken those principles, but got a relatively agnostic platform set up. So it just takes parameters of your Umbraco Cloud clone ID and valid credentials, and from there it'll just infer file paths relative to wherever it's executed, rather than coupling into any specific platform. But one addition we did take between the cloning operation and the copying operation is we have now introduced various DLL version checks to avoid the circumstance we just discussed. And we have identified 5 key DLLs from Umbraco Cloud, which we need to make sure that we are not, deploying an older version of. And it is in that context of an older version of. So we can step on to the next slide, please.
And just before we do, let's just call those out. So that's Umbraco Core, its forms, its deploy, and the deploy connectors, as well as identity, just in case anybody can't see the details on that slide. And there we go.
There we go. So the DLL check we're doing, it's verifying DLL files, but it's checking both the file version and the product version of the file details, just to be safe. But additional to that, it's specifically checking that Umbraco is not ahead of our repository, because there is a potential where we want to force an update ourselves and increase version numbers from us. So it's not purely an equivalent check. It's just making sure Umbraco aren't ahead, and therefore we're not deploying something older than Umbraco Cloud already has.
And Matt, can you just remind me, are there rules on Umbraco's side about whether or not we can roll back?
It is a repo, so we should just be able to undo the commit. My concern there really is when a version number goes out, might that impact the database underneath? And then that would be more difficult to resolve than just a code commit change. If the upgrade process did something to the database, change the schema, or something much more difficult to manage.
Great. I realize that looking at code on screen is always difficult, so I'm just trying to give folks another moment to screenshot that if they want to. But in the end, does this get us what we wanted, Matt?
Yes. So with all of this done, we have managed to achieve our automated process. We've got our build. We now verify the versions as a safety measure. We copy and we commit, initiating the deployment process into the development environment. So that does achieve what we're looking for. However, as you might imagine, nothing is perfect. So we do have still a number of unsolved problems. We do use this process. We have multiple clients using this process. It does work successfully for us, but we definitely still have issues to deal with. So we are using packages which are not publicly available. You'll see we do have deploy listed here. So Umbraco deploy relatively recently with deploy on-prem has become publicly available. However, there is umbraco.deploy.cloud DLL, which is not publicly available. And also the case of identity. So because we can't access these, we are just copying them out of the cloud repository or from the nightly packages Umbraco publish. However, this is a manual process and potentially prone to human error. Ideally, these would be packages we can utilize. However, they're just simply not publicly available. It just means whenever we see Umbraco updating deploy versions or identity versions, it becomes a much more concentrated process for us. We can't just update a package version and assume everything is fine. We need to verify what might be different between cloud and public Umbraco. And additional to the point on deploy, whenever Umbraco do upgrade Umbraco deploy, they get re-serialize all your doc types and all your data types. So all your revision files are up to date. However, when we do this locally, that was not a clear process. So we have had one scenario in which we updated the deploy files, but then on pushing that into cloud, we managed to revert all of the actual serialization files to the version prior, causing site-wide schema mismatch issues. Made perfectly clear by the diff in the commit, so it was easily solved, but that's now a manual human process on our side to make sure that we don't upset the repository and we're able to keep everything aligned.
Are there any other challenges that we haven't yet solved that we haven't outlined here that you can think of?
None I know yet. I'm sure they're waiting for me somewhere.
That's always kind of the kicker. So we're sharing this today in the hopes that maybe others have gotten to this point. Maybe this will help some folks who are still trying to get to this point. And of course, hopefully somebody has solved maybe these challenges that are outlined. And if you do, we're hoping that either you'll share in the unconference or there'll be a continuation of additional blog posts or feedback that's given to the Umbraco Cloud team so that they can iterate on the product in order to make it better and more useful to teams worldwide.
Yeah,
so.
And in that regard, speaking to our partner manager at Umbraco, mentioning our difficulties here, he has said this is something that has some visibility within Umbraco. They are aware that Umbraco Cloud is great for people that just want to use Umbraco, kind of within Umbraco, but if we're speaking about a lot of custom code or a lot of team management and process, it's not an easy solution to use. So I'm sure if we can get any feedback there, I believe the team are listening.
Great. Well, thanks again to everybody at Umbraco for having us, and thanks for watching our talk, and we'll see you in the unconference.
Thank you.
Thank you.